You only have to get it right just one time. Just one time to be a major blessing for your family and for generations to come. And let me define when I say major blessing, because I believe you already are a blessing for your family, but you know what I mean. I mean, have a lasting, tremendous impact on your family and for people that you may never meet in your life for generations to come. And you only have to get it right just one time. I'm reminded of a story, and I've talked about this before a long time ago. This happened way back in the gold rush years, the story of the person who purchased a plot of land. And he found a little bit of gold, but not a lot. And the shortest version of that story is, they did their very best to find more, gold and just end up selling the plot of land to some other person. And this other person discovered a tremendous amount of gold. And this person discovered that the person that sold the field to him had given up, and he was only about 3 feet shy of the gold. So that's why you hear that expression a lot when you hear people say you're only 3 feet away. And that's a story you can go back in history and look it up. It's a well-told story that's been told a gazillion times from many, many years ago in the gold rush days, but in the gold rush years. But it just reminds me that, my goodness, sometimes we can be just a foot away or 3 feet away from our breakthrough, and life just comes at us so hard, am I right? And sometimes we just don't realize that that's when the enemy shows up and does his best, when he knows you're at your breakthrough. So I pray that someone listening to this message today is greatly encouraged, that someone realizes you can only be 3 feet away. 3 feet away. And I understand sometimes it can be tough when you're feeling like you're going and going and going, right? But 3 feet away, can you just imagine for a moment, what if, first of all, this is Zenja Glass. You all are listening to Unlocking Greatness Podcast with Zenja Glass. I have a question to ask you. What if it does work out? What if that dream or that goal or that vision, whatever it is that God has placed in your heart to do that you've been putting off for a long time, what if that's it? What if that is the answer? You all remember there's a chapter in my book. I wrote a book called Necessary. There's a chapter in my book called Strange Favor. I'm going to just turn to it really quickly. I wasn't planning on reading anything from it. But if you have your book, you all turn over to page 72. What's so interesting about strange favor is at first it doesn't look like favor at all from God, right? It just doesn't look like it. And some of you, and there could be someone listening to this message right now who you may be looking at all the times you've tried, all the times you've sort of, I call it put your toe in the water. When you put your toe in the water and tested something, and maybe it worked a little bit. Maybe it actually worked really well, but it was short-lived, right? And maybe it just didn't work at all, and you just tired. And I don't know about you guys, but it seemed like there's just something in the air. Everyone seems so tired right now and just fed up and just, there's just a lot going on. I completely believe, just so you all are aware, in the spirit. And this is why it's so important to get your butt up and be in prayer. I do that quite a bit, even through the night, sometimes at 1 in the morning. And a lot of times, for whatever reason, God gets me up at just before 3 in the morning and I'm praying. But this is the time to definitely be in prayer. But let me stay on target. What if that idea, that one thing you've stuffed way, way, way back in your mind, what if that is it? What if, for those of you who are saying, Z, I'm out there every day, day in and day out, giving it my all. I really am. I'm just tired. And I'm not fully believing that whatever this thing is I'm working for is going to come to be. What if your very next move, what if that's the move that's going to break open the door? I'm going to say that again. What if that very next idea you're thinking of doing, something that takes you out of your comfort zone, right? Something maybe you've not even tried doing before. Maybe you did it before, but it just wasn't the right timing. What if that is what opens the floodgates and blesses your life in such a way that you are a blessing for generations to come? What if you went the extra mile? Or I should say the extra 3 feet, right? and you actually had your breakthrough, what if that one thing actually does work? What if right now it's not supposed to look like what it's supposed to look like because there's just a little something that you need to adjust and do differently? Perhaps just sitting in your secret place with God. You guys know that's a chapter in my book, Necessary. There's a chapter in there called The Secret Place, right? Perhaps God has just given you some instructions. Said, no, don't go this way. I just need you to walk 3 more feet in this direction. What if that strange favor you're feeling from God right now? What if that's his invitation for you to sit down with him for a minute so that he can instruct you and show you what to do? What if he already has someone lined up to help you and you just need to go in this direction instead of that direction? Well, what if you actually decided you're not going to live in fear any longer and you actually realize how short and precious life really is? And what if you really trusted in what God told you to do and you get out there and do it? What we always think about, what if it doesn't work, right? If things don't work out, at least me. Sometimes I go down that pathway of like, oh my goodness, this can happen and this can happen. And what if it does work out? I'm taking the entire Unlocking Greatness community. For those of you who are members of the Unlocking Greatness community, you already know this. We're on like a 21-day challenge and we're doing it all together. All of us are doing it together. And by the time they hear this message, 1 or 2 things I reference in this podcast, they probably are going to be hearing it today inside of the community. But we're on a 21-day challenge to set a goal in mind and do everything we can to focus in just on that goal and walk in that direction. But one of the passages that I gave to them, and I'm just going to give it to you all, is Psalm 25. I'll come back to my book in a minute. But Psalm 25, verse 1 through 3 reminds me, and I've been reciting this quite a bit, but it reminds us that no one whose hope is in the Lord will ever be put to shame. Sometimes the enemy can do an amazing job making us feel ashamed, right? Based on our results, or shame based on, trying again, or shame based on I should be further along in life at this point, or sometimes just a shame because you don't work your whole life building up your career, getting your degrees and doing your thing, and you're not happy, and you feel ashamed or embarrassed that, man, I should be, right? I've talked to some people like that, and I felt that before, where it's like, man, I don't have anything to complain about. I should be happy, right? But why am I feeling ashamed because I don't want to do this anymore? I almost feel like as if I'm telling God, what you gave me is not enough, right? So sometimes we can be tempted to feel that way. The vast majority of that is a complete lie from the enemy. That's just a tactic that the enemy uses. But anyway, there's a passage in Psalm 25, 1 through 3. And I pray that it encourages you all. It says, "To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. In you I trust, O my God. Do not let me be put to shame, nor let my enemies triumph over me." And this is what I love when David said this in verse 3. "No one whose hope is in you will ever be put to shame." Just marinate on that passage for a moment. No one whose hope is in you will ever be put to shame. And I thought, well, can that be true, David? Can that be true, that no one whose hope is in you will ever be put to shame? And then I started thinking about that some more. And I was thinking about this passage at about 1 something this morning as well. And I thought, I guess the reason why that makes sense is because when our hope is in ourselves, when our hope is in our own actions, when our hope is in the results we want, when our hope is in, things we think we can do on our own accord, when our hope is in the, how we think the situation can look, absolutely we can be put to shame. And probably a better word for it is disappointed. But when our hope is in God, we know that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord. We know that. So now that passage makes sense to me when it says, no one whose hope is in you will ever be put to shame. Because whatever situation you allow to happen and however you're going to work it out, I know that you are God, my Savior, and you lead me to green pastures. I know that you protect me. In fact, there's a passage where King David, I hope I can find it real quick. He says in Psalms, in faithfulness, I'm trying to find it while I'm talking to y'all. He says, in faithfulness you have afflicted me. Let me see if that's Psalm 119. Wasn't even planning on turning to this. You guys got me going. I had been meditating on Psalm 119 for a while. He said, Psalm 119, verse 71, it was good for me to be afflicted so that I might learn your decrees. And then he goes on in verse 75, he says, in faithfulness you have afflicted me. I'm like, oh my goodness, how could you say those words? In faithfulness. God is faithful in all of it. You love me enough to allow me to be afflicted. You love me enough to allow me to be discouraged or disappointed at times. Constantly directing me, kind of like a rocket self-correcting itself. You all heard that expression about a rocket failing its way to the moon. I like to give proper credit when credit is due, but so many people have said that statement. I don't know who was the first to say it, so I can't claim it and say that that's for me, but I've heard it many times. A rocket fails its way to the moon. It's constantly correcting courses as it's heading toward the moon. In fact, it's only on course, I think I heard maybe 10% of the time or something like that. In faithfulness, you've afflicted me and allowed me to go through. And in Psalm 27, one of my favorite, my grandpa taught me this. God bless his soul. My grandpa was a minister, and he practically raised me because my mom was just a kid herself when she had me. But that's a whole nother subject all by itself. Bless my mother's soul. She's no longer with me as well. But Psalm 27, I was meditating. First of all, I recite Psalm 27 all the time, but the first part of this, I've just been meditating on it, and I've not been able to get past it. The first part says, in verse 1, the Lord is my light and my salvation. I'm sorry, Psalm 23, not 27. I recite Psalm 27 a whole lot. Psalm 23 is what I just had in mind. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. You guys, I know sometimes it don't feel like green pastures. Sometimes it feels like burnt grass, right? Or no grass at all. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. So whenever there's a lot of anxiety in my life, I think about, is it Philippians 4:6? You guys, this is more of a family talk today because I literally had nothing written down to talk about. So this is all just completely coming from my spirit. Spirit of God just ministering to me. Is it Philippians 4:6? Yes, Philippians 4:6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving present your request to God. And then it says in verse 7, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. It says, don't be anxious about anything. So when you go back over to Psalm 23, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. Whenever I hear quiet waters, I just think my soul is at peace. My mind is not racing. And whenever I'm in a situation like that where I have all this anxiety and stress and I'm rushing, right? I know that there's something off. God, get me back in alignment. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. I'm going to stop right there because that's been about as far as I've been able to get in these last really several weeks. I've been marinating on this passage, but I can only get up to that point. He guides me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. It's all about him being glorified in some way or another. So now I'm going to turn to Strange Favor, which again, I wasn't even planning on reading, but I'm going to read a little bit from Strange Favor. Guys, you only have to get things right just one time. And sometimes the enemy comes at you to try to stop you. And I pray just one person is listening to this message and one person entire mindset has been changed as a result. If you don't have Necessary, you can get it pretty much in any bookstore nationwide, and you can get it on Amazon as well. And many of you may not be aware, but the audiobook is available as a pay what you want. So you can get the audiobook for whatever you want to get it for. By God's grace, I decided to do that so that no one would have an excuse to not grow. No one. You literally have no excuse at this point. So the audiobook is available exclusively on my website at unlockinggreatness.com. Somewhere on the homepage, you'll see a link to be able to get the book as a pay what you want. But let me read the affirmation from Necessary. This is chapter 6, and this is called Strange Favor. And it says, you may not be able to see it right now because I'm still a work in progress, but the favor of God is all over my life. It may not look like favor to you because you don't see the expected end. but just keep watching. Watch and see what God does. Watch and see him turn everything around for my good. Don't mistake my statement as pride. And please don't mistake my faith as wishful thinking. Just keep watching. I almost want to say just keep digging, but I'll just keep in line with what I wrote in my book. Just keep watching. And one day you will see the favor of God has never left me. Now, what many people don't know when I wrote that affirmation, what many people don't know is that's what I was really looking in the mirror saying to myself, because I wasn't feeling the favor of God at that point in my life. So I was reminding myself and saying these words to myself, almost like you're listening to me speak these words. I was speaking these words to myself, reminding myself. When I say you may not be able to see it right now because I'm still a work in progress, well, I wasn't feeling it right at that moment. You get my point? So it really means a lot to me when I read this, because it reminds me of those are the very words that I had to say to myself. But it says, but the favor of God is all over my life. It may not look like favor to you because you don't see the expected end, but just keep watching. Those are the words I was saying to myself. And if you turn over to chapter 6, that's just the affirmation, by the way. Each chapter starts with an affirmation. Page 72. And again, I wouldn't even plan on reading this, but maybe there's just one soul out there that needs to hear these words right now. Someone may have just gotten some news about something, maybe stressed about something, or just not really believing in themselves, or lacking confidence, or whatever the case may be. I just pray that this blesses you. I'm going to read this and I'm going to close this podcast episode out. This is chapter 6. It's called Strange Favor. I'm just going to read just maybe a minute or two, and then I'm going to stop. Sometimes favor doesn't look like favor at all. When my life was falling apart and everything seemed to be spinning out of control, there was no way in the world you could have convinced me that God was showing me favor. What kind of strange favor is that? How could anyone in their right mind call that favor? Especially when you're going through the storms and don't feel his presence at all. Favor should come wrapped with pretty bows and fall from the sky, like an angel bringing you a personal delivery from God, right? Favor shouldn't look like trouble. Favor shouldn't look like pain or discomfort. Favor shouldn't look like times of uncertainty and attacks from the enemy. Favor shouldn't accompany tears or hardships. That's not favor. Or is it? Is it possible that this strange favor from God has a greater purpose in our lives that many of us simply cannot see during our storms? Is it possible that whatever you're going through right now, the strange favor of God is powerfully at work in your life, moving you, strengthening you, making you wiser, teaching you to persevere, positioning you for new territory, taking away what is no longer needed for the next season in your life, building your character, and shaping you to become a light for others? Could it be possible? That's just page 1. I'm not going to read on through it some more. If you all have it, I strongly encourage you to go back and read the entire chapter of Strange Favor. And of course, for many of you, you may already be aware, I go on to talk about Gideon and Joseph and a number of other people in the Bible who were given this strange favor that definitely didn't look like favor at all. But all the time, God was making some chess moves. He was self-correcting that rocket. He was doing everything for his glory. And all that time when it didn't look like favor, God was setting them up for success. So I say to you, my dear brothers and sisters, before I close this out, don't stop when you can be only 3 feet away from the gold. You only have to get it right one time. Just one time. Take another step. And then tomorrow, by the grace of God, God wakes you up. Take another one. And it is my prayer that one day, sooner than you even expect, you experience the breakthrough in life that you've always been looking for. And you be a blessing to your family and others for generations to come. I love you all. I love you. I love you. I love you. I pray that you all are encouraged If anyone does not have a copy of Necessary, please encourage them to get it. Again, you can get the audiobook as a pay what you want on my site at unlockinggreatness.com. I love you all. Please don't ever give up on God. All right? I love you. You're listening to Unlocking Greatness Podcast with Zenja Glass.